Hey guys, I want to talk to you today about cutting and opening in a non-load bearing wall. We're going to cut, this could be a doorway, a window, or just a look-through window. And probably or arguably the most important thing here that I need to stress is you need to make sure that you're cutting a non-load bearing wall. If you're not sure or not qualified to make that determination, you need a professional look at it or a structural engineer. Load bearing walls require structured headers, beams, things like that. Non-load bearing walls or a curtain wall can just be removed. You can cut through it, you can do whatever you want. And that's what we did here. We cut an opening for a client in a wall from their living room to their kitchen so that we could open up that space a little bit. And as part of the layout and the visualization that goes along with that, we used painter's tape to help mark the wall for the client. It helped them visualize it. We actually left it up for a week so they could walk by it, come in and out of the house and look at it, figure out if that's the size they wanted, and they ended up changing it several times. Once the layout is fine and secure, then you got to start thinking about what you're going to do. And what we did is we used levels, and we did level lines and plumb lines to mark one side of the wall perfectly where we wanted this to go. We'll worry about the other side later. Then we start looking at the wall. Are there any outlets, switches, plumbing? You can look from the basement up, from upstairs down. There's lots of ways to try to figure out if there are things in the wall. And if you're unsure, you can punch a hole in the wall or poke a little inspection hole and do inspection holes. If you find utilities in the walls where you want to cut out, you're going to have somebody come and remove or relocate those. So let's assume that all that's been taken care of, and now it's time to cut the wall. Let's talk about dust. Cutting wallboard and blue board and things like that creates a ton of dust. You want to cover your furniture. You want to use a HEPA vacuum to catch the dust at the source while you're cutting. You want to protect the floor. And you really want to follow best practices. And we've written great articles on Carpenter.com. Best practices on remodeling, controlling remodeling dust. Check that article out. It's awesome. So what I like to do is I like to use a multi-tool and a HEPA vacuum. The multi-tool allows me to create an opening with precision and control and does not cause a lot of damage to the surrounding wallboard. So while I'm making my cut with the multi-tool, I'm having a helper hold the HEPA vacuum, and again, collecting the dust at the source. So we cut all the way around the perimeter of one side of the wall, cutting through the board completely. And then we take a hammer and we tap around the edge of the perimeter to make sure that we've broken that connection. And either use a pry bar or poke a hole through the wall with a hammer to create a handhold, and then we rip the wallboard off piece by piece. And the wallboard really does. It comes off in chunks. We move it piece by piece, and then we put it in the barrel, take it out. Once we have one side completely open, we then turn our attention to the opposite side of the wall. And to get our lines transferred, we use long insulation rods. They're insulation holding rods. And we chuck them into our drill. And we basically drill in all four corners through the drywall, and then we just connect the dots. Once that's done, we repeat the process with the multi-tool and the HEPA vacuum, cutting out and removing the drywall. From there, we now have an open space. It's wide open. We need to cut out the studs. I use a reciprocating saw, and we just cut the studs top and bottom, and now we have our opening. Our opening is now defined. And now you need to start thinking about nailers, because we want to install an extension jamb. So what we ended up doing is we put a nailer on one side to pad out the stud so that we could put our extension jamb in. And you want that nailer for fastening. I want to be able to fasten my extension jamb as well as nail my trim to the surrounding studs. So we measure, to do your extension jamb, you have to measure the thickness of your wall, and I do it in a couple of different locations. I rip 1x flat stock to that measurement, and then I make my extension jamb on the ground. It's basically just a rectangular box that we fasten with finish nails, and then we place in the opening. We plumb and level it and shim it in place. So once it's secured, you're then able to install your trim. And installing the trim is probably the final step. You've got to do it to both sides. And if you've noticed in the video, I do my two vertical sides first, the short pieces. And I install my trim 3/16 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch in from the edge of the extension jamb. That leaves a nice reveal. It's a nice touch. Finished carpenters do this stuff all the time. This is how you should do it as well. And then I do my long pieces. I first cut my first long piece extra long. I put a 45-degree cut end on one end, and I flip it over and I line up the two tops. And I run my other end long. And then instead of using a tape measure and a pencil, which can result in errors, I use a utility knife, and you can see me marking it with a utility knife. This gives you a sharp tick mark that you can use and set up on the saw. It eliminates measuring tape error and the error of a thickness of a pencil. So I do it all the time for my finished work. I use that utility knife. And that's it. Once it's trimmed out and we picture framed our trim on all four sides, we caulked it, we filled our nail holes, cleaned up our mess, and good to go. It's time to go home. So something you can do. This job took about 4 to 6 hours tops, from setting up to cleaning up thoroughly at the end of the job. Real easy job. You can do this yourself. I'm Rob Robillard. We'll see you next time.